Alrighty. If you're joining, I'm going to be giving a little bit of a rundown on how how I've managed to go through this MIDI routing wormhole that we all kind of figure out on our own and figure out the little tips and tricks on how to make our sound a little bit better. So I'm going to dig right in. I'm not going to waste a bunch of time getting to this. This will stay here. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. Know there's a little bit of a delay on Facebook for streaming. It's about 8 to maybe 15 seconds. So we're gonna get started. I'm gonna show you how I turned. Let's see, all of this. Let's make sure I got my correct screen up here. All of this stuff into a working template that I'm gonna be using from now on to compose with. Specifically for the marching stuff, what I want to do is have separate templates for like a marching band show, separate templates for just percussion. So we're at percussion right now. So this is pretty cool. What we've managed to do is take Sibelius right here. We managed to take Sibelius. We've also managed to take Studio One, and then we've also managed to take Mainstage and get them all kind of talking to each other and working. I found I found this is really intuitive in the Mac world, and it can be done in the PC world, and so that's where I'm at. I'm going to try to do this. I'm hesitant about making the jump to everything Mac uh, because I like splitting the resources through my programs here. What I've noticed is that relieving a lot of the stuff onto Mainstage has helped. You know, just a couple extra plugins that don't need to be working on the PC at once. Not that I have a problem with it, but you know, splitting the resources, just making the workload easier on everything else works a lot better. And what I managed to do is take a lot of the resources out of Sibelius, using the Sibelius player for pretty much just the battery stuff and a couple of aux percussion things now, and offloaded all the other virtual instruments into Studio One, which we see right here. I've got a list of, let me get rid of our mix here, of pretty much 10 virtual MIDI cables that have all of my metals and all my woods on them right here. I have an aux percussion instruments track, so that way I can just enhance the things that I use instead of only relying on virtual drumline. So I've used, you know, center percussion to kind of enhance that, and I put one or two things in where it needs to be. I've got my Mainstage audio coming out from the MacBook, just direct audio out, DI'd back into this interface right here. And then what I've done is I've just taken those inputs and put them here, so I'm not having to worry about setting a separate mix or setting thing. Of course, I've gain staged on my mixer quite hot because it's a DI. And then, of course, the audio, everything gets routed back through. I'm sorry, all of the audio gets routed back through Studio One here. So we have, what do we have here? Yes, our mix template. So we have all of these instruments, and the master output is what's going in. I want to make sure that I've got all this in a row, so we'll just kind of go into it. First things first, of course, we know Sibelius. We'll get that popped up right here. All right, get our mixer popped up. Most of us know how all this works. I'm going to start with Mainstage and how I've been able to do this. So let me give a quick thing. I'll just play our stuff right here, and we've got Mainstage coming over via audio into Studio One, but the MIDI is all going through. What do I have? I'm gonna make sure I get this. I'm gonna pull over these one at a time. So I noticed I've got all this stuff in all my screens here. So pull out one at a time. So the first step that I had to figure out was how to use RTP MIDI over the network. So I'll pull this over here real quick. We can kind of see this. I had to get MIDI created on a MIDI session created on the PC, and then also a session over on the Mac. Now this is something that is just totally inherent to the Mac world, and you know, the more I dabble in it, the more I realize, man, the Mac world is really great for stuff like this. But I've also figured out that it can be done. So I've installed RTP MIDI on my PC. Did not have to install anything over on the Mac. Mac network MIDI is just built into it, right? So looks exactly the same kind of as in the Mac world. Let me go and pop up over here. on my MacBook Pro display, I've actually networked this over as well, NDI tools. So let me take, there we go, right here. All right, Midi network setup. So I've created 2 sessions on each machine. This machine, MacBook Pro, MacBook Pro 2, 1 Midi cable per each one, and I'm using that because I have 2 staves, or sorry, 2 MIDI keyboards set up in Mainstage, right? Over here in the PC world, let me get back over to my left display. And PC world, I've created 2 sessions right here, Mainstage out 1, Mainstage out 2. This is for the 2 staves in Sibelius, okay? Now, I've connected them, one on each end, right? Mainstage out 2. I didn't have to connect to the extra one. But these are the directories. This is what's available in your network for you to be able to connect to. So I created the 2 sessions, and I've connected the participants on the other side, right, is going to be what you see. So Mainstage out 1 is connected to MacBook Pro. I should actually change that to MacBook Pro 1, right? Mainstage out 2 connected to MacBook Pro 2. And that's sitting over here in these worlds. The exact same thing right here. Don't kind of worry about the mouse. My mouse is really off, so I have to kind of. I don't understand why the mouse looks off in this, but we're gonna go with it. MacBook Pro 2, MacBook Pro. Mainstage out 1 connected to 1. Mainstage out 2 connected to MacBook Pro 2. Right now, over here, this is kind of important little setup that I figured out. This drop down menu, you can't really. There we go. You got to make sure you connect or send, right, which direction you want it to go through. So the network sending out is what I'm trying to do. Network MacBook Pro 2. And this is important in this world over here. We have all this other stuff. You know, we've got our IAC setup, which I still have yet to dive into that world. But what I'm trying to do here is get everything sent over the network. So I don't have to use any I don't have to use any MIDI cables, MIDI splitters, anything like that. Everything's virtual with these programs. So let me go ahead and close this real quick, and I'll show us here. We'll go to layout. I'm going to select the keyboard, MIDI port, MacBook Pro network. Okay, that's where the network MIDI is coming from. Same thing over here on keyboard 2, MacBook Pro 2 network. That's where all of those things are coming from Audio MIDI setup world right here. So we'll go back. We'll just pop that back open. MacBook Pro, MacBook Pro 2. So this is the session. This is where it's coming in from, right? Let me get rid of that and go back over to our edit world here. And boom, back over to left display. In both sides of this, you should be able to see your setup, right? We should be able to see Mainstage out 1, Mainstage out 2 connected to the participants, the opposite side on the network, MacBook Pro 2, MacBook Pro 1. I'll change that later. And same thing over on the Mac world or your MacBook Pro. You should be able to see it on both sides. Your session on your machine, and then the participants on the opposite side, right? Mainstage out 1, Mainstage out 2. I haven't sent any of the MIDI routings right here or receiving anything. It just tends to naturally kind of work over in the Mac world. Like I set it to receive that, and that's how I am able to see those 2 things in Mainstage. So I created those kind of virtual MIDI ports between the machines, and then just like you would select your ISE line, you just select that MIDI input that I've created, which is MS out 1, MS out 2. Over in this world over here, I make sure I'm connecting to that session, and then the MIDI signal that it's receiving is sent to the network setting in Mainstage, which again, I'll pop over and I'll show you real quick. Let me turn that down. I think I have a pretty good setup on that. So right here, so MacBook Pro network, okay, is sent to receive keyboard 1, the top keyboard. Okay. MacBook 2 network is sent to receive from or sent to receive to the second layer keyboard, right? And that's just so we know, hey, we have two different MIDI keyboards, just standard operations. Not going to worry about it. Right, all this stuff, the audio is working. You should be able to hear that, right? So when we get over into the PC world, or I'm sorry, into Sibelius world, right? I have my synth patches down here, right? And I'm actually going to switch back over so I make sure we see our left display here. Synth 1, we're just going to call this Mainstage 1. Mainstage 2. Okay, now I've rebuilt this entire template. So what's happening is like all these little things like this, I just have to redo from scratch, right? I did this whole thing from scratch. Of course, program changes, which was really, really cool. Got to give a shout out to Kevin Shaw and his audio playback magic for really dialing in the program changes for me. I mean, I knew how it worked. I knew how it was possible, but also getting the program changes from the Mac in Mainstage to switch your patches, right, was a little bit of a trick. There's a setting, and you just got to make sure the 0 to 127 or 1 to 128 MIDI messages, whatever your system it is, whatever your system is how you should set it up on the Mac and the PC, if this is the route you choose, of course. So we do have the patch changes working. So I'll just go ahead and throw this on, and then we should be able to hear our Mainstage program booting, or kicking ass and going through this. So I'll switch the screen and I'll just kind of pop this over. Right? So we got this whole issue with like lining all this stuff up. And what for me, I'm still using Rewire, and that's just so I can sync playback between Sibelius and Studio One. The less resources I have in Sibelius running out through that, like I only have the battery and a couple of the aux percussion stuff and the metronome and timpani, right? Basically, like true battery instruments. What we're going to do is we're relieving the stress of Sibelius sending all that audio through Rewire into Studio One. So now I only have just those things. I don't have vibraphones. I don't have marimbas. I don't have, another 10 extra staves to worry about sending audio through. So syncing that up was such a breeze, right? So here we have, let me get back to the mixer. Here we have the mixer. So Mainstage 1, Mainstage 1, Mainstage 2, Mainstage 2. So what I've done is I've just selected right here, right, which one it is that I'm using. MS out 1, MS out 2. Of course, you need to activate all that stuff right here. Oh, wait, let me make sure I switch back. I'll go back here. Okay. So you've selected it right here, but you also have to make sure that you activate it in your playback devices. I've really kind of detailed this one out. So I've got Mainstage out 1, 2, Mainstage out 2. Now that just showed up after I created those, those virtual MIDI ports, right? Yeah, Mainstage out 1, Mainstage out 2. So that's going to be my output for this playback device. Cool? What I've done is taken these two now, Mainstage out 1, Mainstage out 2. All I had to do was just select them over here. Mainstage 1, Mainstage out 1. Okay. The Mainstage out 2 on this one right here, and then Mainstage out 2 for the two staves right there. Not really all that hard, like once I figured it out, but it was a kind of a nightmare to get there, right? We've got this whole this whole world over here in the MacBook, and getting to figure out like what stave is talking to what, which thing talking to what. You have to make sure you have a separate one for each one, and you're sending a separate network signal over to make sure each one of these keyboards is receiving from this MIDI port, MacBook Pro network, and then the next one, MacBook Pro 2 network. And of course, again, that all comes from our MIDI world that we set up in MIDI network setup on the Mac, and then also using RTP MIDI on the PC. So MacBook Pro is connected to Mainstage out 2 from the PC. MacBook Pro 2 is connected to Mainstage out 2. MacBook Pro, Mainstage out 1. MacBook Pro 2, Mainstage out 2. And then these, I had to make sure this was sending so the internals of Mainstage can see it, right? That's where the signal is now coming from. MacBook Pro 2, MacBook Pro 1 for each one of these keyboards. Now, going back over to our PC world, okay, what we figured out in terms of, just sending, and this is all on the PC for sending MIDI data out to your DAW, right? In the Mac world, the IAC drivers is where that lives, I believe. I can't speak to how easy that is, but from what it seems like, that would be a lot easier route to take if you're doing everything on the Mac. But I've lived in this PC world for so long, and I've kind of dealt into it. And then I also really do like kind of splitting my resources between all these. Not only splitting the resources between two separate machines, right? So I have an entire separate sound library on Mainstage, and all the CPU and the memory that I have available is just executing all that stuff at once. And then all the way over here, this PC, Ryzen 9 12-core processor, 64 gigs of RAM. Like, I'm not worried about putting all this stuff on the PC, but as we all know, Sibelius can be just a little bit clunky, right? So what we're going to do now is we're going to check and see how I routed all of the mallet instruments basically from Sibelius into Studio One. Right, so we've got, let me double check there. Here we've got Studio One. Over here, we've got all these nice instrument tracks kind of set up. I'm going to get rid of our mix window. Get rid of our browse window so we have more real estate. All of this stuff has been set up. I use my first track as Rewire. That's just to keep everything in line. All of my metals right here, right? So what I've done, let's go back over to Sibelius world here. This is a completely separate program now that we're going to take a look at, is Loop B30. Okay. Now Loop B30 creates virtual MIDI ports on the PC, right? And for me, this is essentially just like the IAC driver. I can select as many up to, I believe, 30 with this one. I haven't used all 30 because I don't need 30 at this moment. I use 10, right? And what I've done is I've used one virtual MIDI cable per instrument that I'm setting up within Sibelius. Okay, so within Sibelius, I have 10 staves that I needed to work with, 4 vibes, 4 marimbas, a Glock, and a Xylo. Now I can split all that up within the Glock and the Xylo, of course, but we're gonna slow down and just focus on just getting Sibelius to speak to your DAW, right? For me, it's Studio One, so I'm going to focus on getting Sibelius to speak to Studio One. I've created internal MIDI cables, right? And this is just sits here in your system tray. Once it's there, it's there. You don't kind of have to worry about it. If you want to change how many you have available, you have to click this little button right here, and then reboot, and then it'll change how many you need. You can also mute each one's, and then that way it won't show up if you don't need it to show up. Back to Sibelius now. So let's pull up not our mixer. We're going to go to our playback devices, right? Now here's my 10 things right here. 10 internal MIDI cables. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Each one is now its own kind of playback device, its own thing. So now I'm just going to be able to send it wherever I want within my own machine. Okay. So there's internal MIDI 1. or internal MIDI 1, internal MIDI 2. I have them set up exactly right here on our mixer, right? This is internal MIDI 1, this is internal MIDI 2, internal MIDI 3. Now for me, I had to separate each one by channel. Like even though this is a separate playback device, I had to select channel 2. It would send all the data to wherever I was in Studio 1, and everything with channel 1 would pick it up. So it doesn't matter if it was on a completely separate device or a completely separate MIDI cable. I don't know why, but that's the fix that I had to do. So each one has its own separate channel and its own separate virtual MIDI cable. Channel 1, Glock. Channel 2, Vibes, so on and so forth. Channel 6, Xylo. And the next 4 to 10 are the marimbas, right? Of course, grain staves with the marimbas, so I just made the same setting. Cable 7, channel 7, channel 7. Now, when we set this up over here, like I'm just going to play it, and I don't have anything set up on the opposite side, or if I don't have my tracks enabled, it's just going to sit there. It's not really going to do anything, right? All right, I've got the drum set. I've got the timpani will come in a little bit. This is all Mainstage. But if I don't have... If I don't have all that record enabled over here, it's not going to be listening for the input, okay? All right, let's go ahead and take a look at this. So now we've got Sibelius set up. With selecting the right channels in our mixer. And then, of course, in order to do that, you have to make sure there's active devices. Those internal MIDI cables are set up right here in your playback devices. So, done that. I've activated the devices. That's step 1. Step 2, select them in here. Again, I did separate channels for each separate cable, just so it all lined up. I'm thinking this is like a one-to-one patch system. MIDI cable 1 sits on channel 1. MIDI cable 2, I'm going to separate it to channel 2. MIDI cable 3, channel 3, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? So, again, still just doesn't work the way you want it to, right? It's not as intuitive. So now we're going to go back over to Studio 1, and I'll show you what we had to do. So, let's hit up our Glocks. I'm going to hit this button right here, and that will bring into view my plugin. Okay, we have Contact, of course, great. Instrument banks. If you're not familiar with this, definitely try to look it up. This is something I really dug into over the past couple years, was getting the instrument banks kind of working for me, program changes, all within Sibelius. It was a severe eye opener, like to say, okay, I can just write in the score, use hard mallets, and it was great. But to be able to have that like truly replicated, great. What I've done is I've used not just the stuff from VDL, but I've also used stuff from Cine Percussion as well, right? So different kind of setup, different vibe, gives it a really nice kind of glossy sheen when you're working with like orchestral sounds as opposed to just the VDL sounds, right? And as a little bonus to see that, what I'm going to do is I'll set Vibes 2 up here, just Vibes Bank. I've saved each one of these banks, right? Vibes for Tan Hard, blah, 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 blah. And then this one is also from Cine Percussion as well. Being able to route these, now I have, this is where this kind of funky thing comes from. We go back over to our Glocks and Crots, right? Each one of these kind of sits, this is program change, right? This is not channel change, instrument change, or anything like that within Sibelius. It's just a program change. Being able to do that, now I've set my internal MIDI cable 1. Let me back up real quick. Let me show how we get those activated here in Studio 1. You should probably have to do this within any DAW, so let's just double check. I've added external devices right here. I've got my keyboard, UCNet remote. That's for me to be able to control Studio 1 from my mixer, but I don't have everything hooked up right now because I'm painting my house. Internal MIDI 1, internal MIDI 2, 3, 4, right? I've just kept them the same, like, naming scheme of where they sit in your system inherently, right? I didn't try to change it and say, okay, this one's going to be Glocks, this one's going to be that. I've done that well within my instruments within Studio One. So I don't want to do that with the virtual MIDI cables, because what if I change it or start reorganizing? I didn't want to have to go back and either remove or edit the actual devices within Studio One. Internal MIDI 1 to internal MIDI 10. Great. I've got those being able to receive data within Studio One. Okay. So what I set here, back to Glocks, and I have this, finding little things. Glocks. Okay. I have the instrument sits right here. I've got the channel, the MIDI channel, and then the cable. So I've used cable 1. I just kept it to channel 1. Same thing up here, receiving on 1, A1, right? Being able to go through the program changes now, everything works great. I had to do that for each and every single one of these, okay? I created another plugin right here. If you notice, this says Vibe 1, Vibe 2, Vibe 3, Vibes 4, Glocks. And this is so I can use if I want to use a separate set of mallets for Vibes 1 and 2, Vibes 3 and 4, I can absolutely do that. Now let's back up and I'll show you exactly how we implemented this. Okay, get rid of our mixer here. I've got right here, boom, say softs. Soft mallets. Boom, soft mallets, right? We're going to zoom in real quick and I'll see. Now we see our program changes, right? Program changes, soft mallets. Each one of these, I can have soft mallets, I can have hard mallets, and I can have shafts, which is exactly what I did. So now if I see what's happening right here, it will show me within Contact. I'll bring this back over just real quick. Okay, Vibes 3. Now I want to push play right here. Vibes are 10. See, it switched when that program changed. Program changes right here. You're all going to go back. So, having all that handy within the world of how we use Contact, of course, a lot of people already know how to do this, but still, MIDI routing so I can have all of this set up within Studio One, offloading that resource demand into Studio One, which is absolutely, better equipped to handle this stuff than Sibelius is, right? Now, within Studio One, now I don't even have to write the MIDI in. I'm just listening to it being played and triggered. If I started writing automation in here within Studio One, like within each one of these tracks, like that would be a completely separate thing, right? Now I could detail out and get a much, much better production value. Cool. Skipping back. Okay. RTP MIDI done. Loop B30 done. Now let's talk about how I'm like actually getting the keyboards to speak to each other. Okay. So if you notice, if you play, I can get all that stuff still back in. Okay. Windows has this funky thing where you can't send a bunch of MIDI to different applications at once. Like once your MIDI device is kind of being used by an application, everybody else goes, nope, I'm too dumb to just piggyback off that. I had to create and install another, or not create, I installed another program called Loop MIDI, and this is where it is right here. And then MIDI aux as well. So I'll bring that into view as well. So Loop MIDI and MIDI aux. A lot of people know MIDI aux. It's just a way for us to test our things. But now what I've done, MIDI aux, MIDI devices, I've selected my device, right? And then where I'm going to send it. So there's two things that I had to do. In Loop Midi, I had to create two um, two sets of MIDI outputs to where I wanted my MIDI keyboard to go. Okay, so now I can play within Studio One just by itself as well. Right, and then if I want to play with my risers thing, that one sounds funky. Let's do a randomize until we can get a decent sound. All right, whoop-de-doo. So within that, like now I have the ability to control all of these things at the same time just by using Loop Midi. Okay, what I've done is I've set one MIDI port, a loopback MIDI port to Studio One, and I've set one for my Sibelius input. Okay, now going back over to MIDI OX. Again, this is a little clunky, I know, but I figured it all out, and it's been one hell of a ride, let me tell you. But now I figured this out. Automatically attach inputs to outputs during selection. So now my MIDI input right here, my key station, my actual MIDI keyboard. Now I'm attaching the outputs to Sibelius input and Studio One. So now this is basically piggybacking on both of these things. I can play with the risers. I can play with the sketch pad right here, right? And I can go back over now to Sibelius, and I can also do that. Oh, I still have this activated. Oh, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? I know what I did wrong. Let's go back over to Studio One. And this is the funky thing again. I have to have these record enabled in order to be able to hear them, like the playback through this. Right? Now, if I actually also record enable this too, same thing. Right? Piano's killing that sound, so I need to make sure that I have. Right? And I can go to this, Xylo. Number 3. Oh, inputted. Etc., etc., etc. Okay. Now, what about Mainstage? I don't have my computer physically hooked up, or I'm sorry, I don't have my MIDI keyboard physically hooked up to my MacBook. So how is that reading it? Well, it's just going through Sibelius, right? I've already kind of taken care of that program with, I've already taken care of that problem just by routing MIDI from Sibelius over to Mainstage. So I'm going to do the same thing like I normally would, right? Right? And I can sit here through Sibelius and still kind of play and get that to happen. Boom. So, having said that, I'm going to listen to this a few times and we'll see how these program changes and everything kind of worked out and how this kind of works out. Again, this is just kind of threw this together to see, mainly just working on the mallet stuff, getting a couple Mainstage patches to kind of go through, getting our program change to work, etc. This might be chaotic to look at all this, but this is what it's going to be. All right. I'm going to just play this a couple times and we'll see kind of where it's at. I think this is looped anyways. volume wise, not too bad. I can adjust here within. I can adjust everything within Studio One to get a good production value. Right. I don't have to right now. Like, of course, within Mainstage, I can adjust volumes. Of course, within this, I can adjust volumes. That should also be done like at the performer level. Like they're inherently going to have a different type of need for a mix. So I'm just going to leave it as it is in Mainstage for now. Right. Uh, Vibes, all this information with the program changes and everything. Same thing with our studio. I'm sorry, our Sibelius. Right. The program changes in here. They all work flawlessly, so I'm not worried about that. Same thing with Mainstage. Like the program changes here work absolutely wonderful, so I'm not worried about that. It's again, it's but this has been like a super nightmare. I think kind of trying to figure all this out, but now that I have it, like I feel a lot more confident being able to say, okay, I can do all of this at the same time. And again, my computers just are killing it. I'm not worried about my MacBook i9 processor, 16 gigs of RAM. Anything I throw at it in Mainstage, I think is going to be perfectly fine. My computer or my PC, 64 gigs of RAM, 12 core processor. I'm not worried about throwing anything at it through Sibelius. And the fact that I like took a lot of the stuff out of Sibelius, like the only thing that I have right now running through like actually plugins within Sibelius is, let's see, one instance of VDL, one instance to Contact. And I'll show you that real quick. Instead of having all the mallets, like this is all I have within Contact for this now. And of course, I made my own kind of multi-rack setup. I have saved all these. Similar line, bass line, batteries in there. Battery stabs are hidden in the score right now. Timpani, metals combo, rack combo. All that's like super easy now to kind of send over rewire. I'm not going to worry about little choppiness in what otherwise wouldn't sound good with a melodic instrument. Whereas membranophones, it's just it is what it is, right? I'm not going to worry about it. Cool. That's pretty much it. I'll play this one more time and then I'm going to get out of here. It's been a blast doing this. It's been really, really fun trying to figure all this stuff out. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Don't hesitate to reach out. It's been sweet. So I'll play this one more time. Put it back on my all screen displays. We can see everything. And that's it. That's a wrap. Like I said, any questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you so much. Hope everybody's been having a great and fun time returning to WGI. Of course, I know I have. It's been an absolute treasure.